Hey fly tires, welcome back. And if this is your first time to the channel, then welcome. My name is Matt, and we're all about learning how to tie flies. Now the pattern I'm going to be walking you through today, it's called the Alexandra. Used to be called Lady of the Lake, renamed sometime in the 1800s, I think, after Princess Alexandra from Great Britain. It's probably been here in the United States for at least 100 years. It's been a very popular fly here, as well as Great Britain. A wet fly and a streamer. Not too difficult to tie. There's quite a few components going into it, but I think you're going to enjoy it, so let's get started. As always, I will explain the materials as I go and put the recipe in the description. So in the vise, I'm tying this on a size 10. It's a 1X long barbless wet fly hook. I'm going to lay down a base of black 70 denier UTC. So get that about to the start of the bend of the hook. Now this does have a tail. It is a red slip of duck or goose feather. Now you could take a left and right slip and marry them. I think that's a little bit overkill. I think one does just fine. So about the length right there. I'm going to tie it with the longer side down because it'll flare up as soon as I do this pinch wrap right here. Okay, now, see I pulled that a little tight there, but that's just fine. We've got enough material on the back there for a solid tail. So, a couple more securing wraps right there. Now the next component is our rib. Now you have a couple options here. You could go with silver oval tinsel or silver wire. I'm going with a wire, and this is a size brassy. See, I'm going to catch that in at about a 45-degree angle. See the length there? That's about what I want because I want that to help me lay the base of the body. So I'm going to catch that in to where I want to start wrapping it, and then I will just try to wrap this the rest of the way on up, keeping it as smooth as I can make it. Okay, you saw that feather. It spun around on me a little bit, but the body's still pretty smooth, so that's not going to be too lumpy when I wrap the mylar tinsel. So I've got, this is gold and silver. It's a size 14, which I guess is probably size large. I'm going to catch it in with the gold side up, so that when I flip it over to wrap, you will see the silver. I'm going to lay that the length of the body. This helps if you had any lumps or imperfections from, that tail feather or your rib under there. This would help smooth that out just a little bit. So I'm going to take this all the way back here to the start of the tail. Now take my thread back up to the top. Okay, be careful with your tail. You can mess that up a little bit. So I'm going to wrap the body. The first wrap is probably the hardest. If you get that one, the rest of them, you just overlap them maybe by half, going straight up. That should get you a fairly smooth body. Okay, when you've got that up to the front, go ahead and catch this tinsel in, a couple of wraps before you snip it off. Sometimes I'll fold it back on itself to get a couple of securing wraps just before I cut it. Probably don't have to. You're going to have a little tag there when you cut it, then you can bury that and it will be pretty secure. So now we wrap the rib. You don't need to counter wrap this thing. I'm going to wrap it exactly the same way I wrap that body. About 5 or 6 evenly spaced turns will work. Okay, now when you got that up the top, back to the front. Couple of securing wraps there. What I do, I'll put some tension on my thread, hold that tight while I spin it off. Now you might have a little sharp point on that, so I will put some loose wraps right here, just try and bury that. So the next component is our hackle. Now you can use saddle hackle, black, any type of black hackle. I'm using a hen. It's not a wet fly hackle, but it is a hen. I think it looks a bit better. So I'm going to pull that back, get my tie-in point, catch it in with the concave side toward the hook. Couple wraps right there. Fold that back over on itself. A couple more securing wraps. Now you might be able to just break that off right there. Okay. Now I've got a couple inches here, so I'm not going to use my hackle pliers. I'm just going to pull this back and make about 3 wraps here. Each one just in front of the other. Maybe I should have used my hackle pliers. I don't have a whole lot, after 3 wraps, I don't have a whole lot to grab hold of. So I'm going to catch this in right here. Now before I snip that piece, you see I got some feathers going forward, or some fibers of the feather going forward. I'm just going to pull this back, make a couple of wraps right here. And then you could probably break that off, but by now the stem is a little bit thicker, so I'm just going to snip it. So there's your hackle. Maybe a couple more wraps to secure it. Now the next component is Peacock sword fibers. So if you got some sword fibers, you know, not the hurl, the sword fibers. The easiest way to do this is to just cut a little slip with the stem on it. And about 5 or 6 of them will be fine. Then do that from a left and a right piece that are about the same lengths. Hold them together, and then you see that they're a little bit flatter when you've got a left and a right one. If you just grabbed a handful of them from each feather, they're probably going to go all over the place. I mean, the fly will fish just fine, but it's not going to be as pretty. So the length, you know, just past the bend of the hook, maybe not quite as long as the tail. So I'm going to switch my hands here, and I'm going to do a pinch wrap. Hold that in. These are pretty thick. So I'll do a couple wraps, and I'll check my position. Okay. Let's check that. How's that looking? Well, it's going to spin on me. So I'm going to need another tighter securing wrap right there. So maybe 2. Let's see, there's 2. Now it's not too late to change my position if I need to, but I'll look at it. And they're for the most part coming off the top there. You can see that. So I think I'm going to go with that. I will put another couple of wraps to secure it right here. And then I'm going to just lift these up and snip them off as close as I can get it, just to keep from crowding the head when I finish it off. So you got a little bit of fuzz sticking up in there. If you can push that up with your fingernail or your bodkin, that might help. We've got another component here in just a second, so I'm going to try to capture some of these up here before I do it. So the last component, just that same duck or goose, very small little sliver here. Now this is just 3 fibers, literally 3 fibers from that same duck feather. And if you were doing goose, you might even do 2. So it's just a tiny little sliver. Now I saw Davy McPhail tie a variant of this, and he used red flash for this. It looked really good. So, but the original, I'm trying to keep this one fairly original, is the feather. So you see that? It's not the top of the peacock sword fibers, but it's not along the body either. So it's just kind of a small piece in the middle. So do the same thing on this side, about the length of the body, maybe a 45-degree angle. So a couple of wraps there. Check your position on this side. Okay, I like that. And I like it right there. So I think we're good to go ahead and secure this. And we got a couple of butt ends we need to take care of. So I'm going to reach in here, get them as close as I can get. And do the same thing. Just poke these up. It's a wet fly. Don't worry about having a tiny head on it, but do worry about not closing up your head or closing up your eye. So a couple of wraps, wiggling them through there. Now I think I can bury this, hide those red butt ends right there. Got a little bit of red showing. How many more wraps is that going to take? Yeah, that's close enough. We can probably finish that off with the whip finish. So take your whip finish tool, or if you're really old school tying these old flies, you can do this by hand. It takes about 3 seconds to do it with the tool. It takes me about 2 minutes to do a shoddy job with my fingers. So there you go, guys. The Alexandra, very classic old school wet fly, very effective pattern. Any pattern that's lasted 150 years is lasted because it works. Drop a head cement, and this thing's good to go. So that's all. I do appreciate you watching, folks. I hope you will consider subscribing. So that's all. We'll see you next week.